Imagine this. A woman once entangled in the chaos of a connection suddenly withdraws. It's not a physical departure, but a shift, deep within herself. The world around her seems to grow distant as she begins to reclaim her energy, her space, her silence. And what happens next? What follows when a woman steps back from a bond, from a man who once held her focus, her heart, her attention? In the silence that follows, a storm brews within him. Her absence, her retreat, triggers something primal, something unconscious. A force awakens. Obsession. It is the very thing he once took for granted, now looming over him like an insatiable hunger. But it is not merely a desire to possess her, it is an unraveling of his own ego, a challenge to his sense of control, of worth, of identity. For when a woman withdraws, she pulls not just away from him but from the projections he placed upon her. He sees her not for who she truly is, but for the parts of himself he has projected onto her, the parts of himself he refuses to face. He was not in love with her. He was in love with the image he created. She was the vessel for his own unconscious desires, a reflection of what he needed her to be. But when she pulls away, the image cracks. The reflection shatters. And in that moment he is forced to confront what he truly seeks. Not her, but the pieces of himself he has neglected. This is the heart of Carl Jung's psychology, the delicate dance of projection and withdrawal. The man, in his need for control and validation, projects his unconscious desires onto the woman, and in return, she becomes an extension of his ego. But when she withdraws, when she steps back and reclaims her own energy, her autonomy, she forces him to confront the shadow of his own psyche, the darker parts of himself he keeps buried deep. It is here, in this withdrawal, that the obsession begins, not because of what he loses, but because of what he must now face. The woman's absence brings a deeper awareness of the lack that was always there. It is not simply a fear of losing her, but the revelation that his desire was never truly about her at all. It was about filling a void, about seeking wholeness in the reflection of another. This is the painful awakening of the masculine psyche, the realization that he has placed his sense of worth in something external, something outside of himself. He was never complete. He was only ever whole when he could project his need onto her. And now, with her withdrawal, that projection is gone. But here is the deeper truth. The withdrawal of the woman is not an act of punishment. It is an act of self-preservation. It is an act of reclaiming her own sense of being, her own sovereignty. The feminine is always in a delicate balance, often giving and nurturing, often becoming entangled in the needs of others. But in withdrawing, she reestablishes the boundary that was once blurred, the boundary between self and other. She finds herself again. She remembers who she is, and this in turn forces the man to reckon with his own projections and insecurities. The obsession he feels is a reflection of his own discontent. The more she withdraws, the more he chases, trying to fill the emptiness left behind. It is the classic dynamic of the pursuer and the distancer, but it is also something deeper. The chase is not truly about winning her back. It is about trying to restore his own sense of self. His obsession is born not out of love, but out of desperation, a desperation to fill the hole inside him, a hole that only he can mend. For the woman, this withdrawal is a reclaiming of her essence. It is not a rejection of him, but a reclamation of her power. She is not playing a game. She is simply following the deep rhythm of her own soul, the call to withdraw into her own center, to reconnect with her true self. And in that silence, she becomes whole again. She becomes a force of her own. She does not need him to define her, to validate her, to fill her. She is complete as she is. But this is where the tragedy lies. The man, obsessed and disillusioned, cannot see this. He cannot see that her withdrawal is not an act of malice, but an act of strength. He is blind to the deeper meaning behind her silence. His obsession continues, fueled by a fear of losing something that was never truly his to begin with. The more he chases, the more he is drawn into a cycle of insecurity, of self-doubt, and of projection. And so, the dance continues. He chases. She withdraws. He becomes obsessed. She becomes more distant. But in this dynamic, a deeper question arises. Who is truly lost? The woman, who has always known her worth, or the man, who has projected his own fractured sense of self onto her? The woman who withdraws is not retreating out of fear. She is not running away. She is stepping into her own power. And the man, in his obsession, is not truly chasing her. He is chasing the image of himself that he has lost. It is a game of shadows, a game of projections, where neither truly understands the other. What would happen if the man stopped chasing? What would happen if he faced his own shadow, his own insecurities, and reclaimed the parts of himself he has cast aside? What if the woman, instead of withdrawing, opened herself to a deeper connection with herself, unburdened by the projections of others? The answer lies not in the chase, but in the silence. And in the silence, the true transformation begins. The obsession grows, not in isolation, but in the fertile ground of unconscious desires. He watches her, from afar or up close, desperate to understand her withdrawal, to break the silence she has created. And yet, it is in this silence that the truth of her power lies. She becomes an enigma to him, a puzzle that he cannot solve, a riddle that ignites his deepest frustrations, his most profound insecurities. For the first time, he must confront the reality that he cannot control her, cannot possess her, cannot bend her to fit the mold he has carefully crafted in his mind, and that realization is the crux of his obsession. It is not the fear of losing her, but the fear of facing himself. Her withdrawal mirrors the parts of him he cannot control, the parts he has left untouched, unexamined. Jung often spoke of the shadow, those parts of the self that are repressed, that are not acknowledged or understood. The shadow is composed of the traits and desires that we deem unacceptable or too painful to face. And yet, they are always there, lurking in the unconscious, waiting to be integrated. The woman's withdrawal forces him to confront his own shadow, not just the desire for her, but the deeper, more uncomfortable truths about himself. In chasing her, he is unconsciously chasing the parts of himself he refuses to acknowledge. But it is not just the man who faces the shadow in this dynamic. The woman, too, is engaging in a process of individuation. Her withdrawal is not an abandonment. It is a return to herself. She is not simply stepping away from him. She is stepping into her own power, into her own mystery, into the fullness of her being. She realizes that she does not need him to complete her, to define her, or to make her whole. Her worth is inherent, and in her withdrawal she reclaims that inherent value. Her silence is not a punishment. It is an invitation. It is an invitation to him to see beyond the projections, to see beyond the desire, and to understand the true nature of their connection. But it is also an invitation to herself to reconnect with her essence, to embrace the fullness of her being without apology or compromise. In this space, she is free. Free from his gaze, free from his expectations, free from the roles he has cast her in. And as she becomes free, so too does she become more magnetic. The more she steps into herself, the more her energy radiates outward, but not in the way he expects. It is not the energy of submission, nor is it the energy of appeasing his desires. It is the energy of sovereignty, the energy of a woman who knows who she is and is no longer willing to give herself away to anyone who does not recognize her worth. And this is what drives him mad. The more she withdraws, the more he chases, and the more he chases, the more distant she becomes. It is a cycle, a pattern that repeats itself, a game of cat and mouse. But the true question here is not who will win the chase. The true question is, what does the chase mean? In Jungian terms, this dynamic is a manifestation of the anima and the animus, the unconscious, opposite-gendered aspects of the psyche. The anima, the feminine aspect in the man, is projected onto the woman, and the animus, the masculine aspect in the woman, is projected onto the man. These projections are not real. They are ideals, fantasies, and desires shaped by the unconscious. When the woman withdraws, she strips away the projection, forcing the man to face the true nature of his desires and the parts of himself he has neglected. For the man, the woman is no longer an object to be possessed or controlled. She becomes the mirror to his own soul, a reflection of his own inner landscape. And in this reflection, he begins to see himself, his fears, his desires, his inadequacies. Her withdrawal is the moment he can no longer avoid this confrontation. He must ask himself, what is it that I truly want? Is it her, or is it the fantasy of her? Is it love, or is it validation? Is it connection, or is it control? And this is the crux of the obsession. The more he chases, the more he reveals to himself the truth of his own limitations, the truth of his own needs. The more he desires her, the more he sees the parts of himself that are incomplete, that are still searching for external validation. The more he obsesses, the more he feeds into the cycle of projection, unable to see that the source of his discontent is not her, but his own inner fragmentation. But there is power in this. The power lies not in continuing the chase, but in stopping it, in turning inward. The moment the man steps away from the obsession, the moment he ceases to chase her, he faces himself. He confronts his own shadow and begins the painful, but ultimately transformative process of individuation. He stops seeking completion in another and begins the journey of completing himself. And as for the woman, her withdrawal is the ultimate act of empowerment. She does not need to chase after anything. She does not need to chase his validation, his love, or his approval. She is enough as she is. She is whole. She is free. And in her freedom, she becomes even more magnetic, not because she is seeking validation, but because she has stopped seeking altogether. For in the end, it is the woman who knows her worth who holds all the power. It is she who chooses, not because she needs, but because she desires. And it is in this choosing that her true strength lies. The more the man chases, the more elusive she becomes. He thinks he is pursuing her, but what he is truly pursuing is something deeper, something within himself that he cannot yet articulate. In his desperation to possess her, to reclaim the fantasy of who he thought she was, he becomes entangled in a trap of his own making. The chase is not about her at all. It is about his own need to prove something to himself, to reaffirm his worth, to fill the void within him that nothing outside of himself can heal. But what happens when he stops chasing? What happens when he steps away from the need to control, to possess, to validate? In that moment of pause, of silence, he is confronted with the question that has always been there, just beneath the surface. Who am I without her? This is the pivotal moment. It is in this silence that true transformation begins. The obsession fades not because the woman becomes less magnetic, but because he stops looking to her to define his identity. His sense of self, his worth, is no longer reliant on her presence or absence. He begins to see that the object of his obsession was never her, but the reflection of his own unconscious desires, the parts of himself that he refused to confront. Jung spoke of the need for individuals to confront their shadows, the parts of themselves that they have rejected or denied. In this case, the man's shadow is revealed in his obsession, the fear of inadequacy, the fear of being incomplete, the fear of facing himself. But as he ceases to chase, he begins to integrate those fragmented parts of himself. He realizes that his sense of self cannot come from an external source. It must come from within. The woman's withdrawal in this sense is not a rejection, but an invitation to both of them. It is an invitation to face the parts of themselves that have been hidden, ignored, or denied. She withdraws to reclaim her power, to reconnect with her own essence, and in doing so, she invites him to do the same. She does not need him to validate her. She is already whole. And in her wholeness, she becomes an even more powerful force. But the key is not in her actions. The key is in his response. It is in his decision to stop chasing, to stop seeing her as the object of his desires, and to begin seeing her as she truly is. A woman, complete in herself, who needs no validation from anyone. When he ceases to chase, he ceases to project. And in that moment the dynamic shifts. No longer is he the pursuer and she the elusive prize. Instead, they stand as equals, each with their own identity, their own sense of self. The obsession fades because it was never about her at all. It was about him. And in ceasing to chase, he allows both of them the freedom to be whole, to be authentic, to be real. This is the paradox of the feminine and masculine dynamic. The more one seeks validation, the more elusive it becomes. The more one tries to possess, the more one loses. True empowerment comes not from the chase, but from the release of the need for external validation. The woman who knows her worth does not need to chase after anything, for she is complete as she is. She does not need to prove her value, to win anyone's approval, to make anyone see her worth. Her worth is inherent, and when she understands this, she becomes untouchable in the truest sense. Not because she is unapproachable, but because she is sovereign. She is not a prize to be won. She is a woman who has already chosen herself. And the man, if he truly wishes to understand the depth of their connection, must stop chasing her. He must turn inward and face his own shadows. He must stop projecting his own insecurities onto her and begin the long process of individuation. The process of integrating the parts of himself he has long neglected. It is not an easy journey, but it is a necessary one if he wishes to experience true connection, true intimacy. For in the end, it is not about possession. It is not about control. It is about the freedom to choose, the freedom to stand fully in oneself, without the need for external validation. It is about releasing the need to chase, to possess, to control, and instead choosing to connect from a place of wholeness, from a place of authenticity. The woman who withdraws, the woman who reclaims her power, does not need to chase. She does not need to prove anything. She simply chooses, and in that choice she becomes magnetic, not because she is seeking anything, but because she has everything she needs within herself. And the man, when he stops chasing, when he stops projecting his desires onto her, begins the journey of reclaiming his own power. He realizes that true connection comes not from possession, but from mutual respect, from authenticity, from the willingness to stand side by side, whole and complete. So, what happens when the chase ends? When the obsession fades? Both are left, standing in their own power, each free to choose, each free to be. And in that freedom, a deeper connection is possible. Not one built on need or desire, but one built on mutual respect, mutual understanding, and mutual wholeness. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase. She chooses. And as the chase fades into silence, both the woman and the man are left to confront the vastness of their own beings. For the woman, the withdrawal was not an act of spite, but an act of sovereignty. She withdrew not because she needed to punish him, but because she needed to reclaim herself, to return to the source of her own power. Her silence is the echo of an inner knowing, the realization that she does not exist to fill another's void, to answer another's need. She exists for herself, and in that truth, she becomes radiant. The more she stands in her autonomy, the more she reclaims her strength. She no longer requires external validation to feel complete. In this space, she finds peace, a peace that comes not from the approval of others, but from the quiet knowing that she is enough. And in this peace, her true power is revealed. She is magnetic not because she seeks attention or approval, but because she exudes the quiet confidence of a woman who has come home to herself. Her withdrawal is not a rejection. It is an invitation to a deeper connection, one that transcends the superficiality of need and desire. It is an invitation to him and to herself to engage from a place of wholeness, not from the place of need. And in this, she stands firm in her own identity, grounded in the truth of her worth. The woman who knows her worth does not bend to the whims of anyone's desire. She is the chooser, not the chosen. She moves from a place of inner alignment, a place of knowing that she is whole, regardless of the external circumstances or the projections of others. But this journey, while one of empowerment, is not an easy one. The woman who withdraws is not exempt from the challenges of confronting her own shadows. The process of individuation, the journey of becoming whole, is one of self-examination and growth. She must face the parts of herself she has neglected, the parts she has been afraid to confront. It is only by integrating these shadows, the parts of herself she has hidden from the world, that she can truly step into her full power. In this journey of self-empowerment, the woman must not shy away from the darkness, from the emotions, the fears, and the doubts that arise. She must face them head-on, allowing them to inform her, to shape her without allowing them to define her. The woman who knows her worth embraces her full spectrum, the light and the dark, the strong and the vulnerable. She is not afraid to be whole in all her complexity. And this is the paradox of the feminine. She is both tender and fierce, both nurturing and independent, both receptive and powerful. The woman who withdraws is not retreating into weakness, but into her own strength. She is not hiding, she is recalibrating, rebalancing. She is moving deeper into herself, so that when she returns, she does so not as the object of anyone's desires, but as the sovereign of her own realm. The man, too, must face his shadows. His obsession, his chase, reveals the parts of himself he has neglected, the need for validation, the fear of inadequacy, the projection of his unconscious desires. But in stepping away from the chase, he begins the process of reclaiming his own identity. He realizes that his worth does not lie in the approval of others, and that true intimacy cannot be found through possession, but through mutual respect and understanding. The more he focuses on his own growth, the less he will seek validation from external sources. And in that space of self-empowerment, he too becomes magnetic. Not because he needs someone to complete him, but because he is complete in himself. This serves as a mirror to the man's. The woman's withdrawal serves as a mirror to the man's soul, forcing him to confront the very nature of his desires. In chasing her, he has been chasing an illusion, an idealized image of her that he has created, not her true essence. But as she pulls away, he is forced to see her as she truly is, not as the object of his projections, but as a whole and complete person. And it is only when he stops chasing that he can truly begin to see her and himself clearly. The true magic of the feminine and masculine dynamic lies not in the chase, but in the freedom to stand side by side, each complete in themselves. The woman who withdraws is not creating distance to punish. She is creating space to reclaim her power, to return to herself. And in that space, the man can learn to do the same. For it is not about who chases or who retreats, but about the mutual respect, understanding, and freedom that exists when both individuals are whole. The obsession fades when the need to control is released, when both parties recognize that their worth is not dependent on the other. It is in this mutual recognition of autonomy and sovereignty that true intimacy can blossom. In the end, it is the woman who knows her worth who holds the key. She does not chase, she chooses. She chooses herself, her path, her destiny. And in this choice, she becomes free. The man too can choose, not from a place of obsession or need, but from a place of self-awareness, of wholeness. When both choose from this place of freedom, the connection that arises is one that is built on respect, on understanding, on mutual growth. And in this, they both find the true meaning of connection. Not a connection rooted in need, but one rooted in choice. And in the end, the woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses. End.